I'm David Flint, and this is Conversations with Conservatives from Safe Worlds TV on the Gold Coast, Queensland, Australia. My guest today is Pauline Hanson, standing to be Senator for Queensland and leader of Pauline Hanson's One Nation Party, a logo, a name which will appear on all Senate ballot papers throughout the Commonwealth. Pauline Hanson, even your opponents will say, they'll admit that you are courageous and that you're plain speaking. But recently the Prime Minister declared that you were not welcome in Australian politics. What do you think of that?
David, I think people of Australia were actually shocked with his comments. To think that we live in a democracy and people cast their votes at the polling booth, and yet to hear him come out and make the comments that he did, people feel he doesn't have a right to actually say that. And they're right. It's not what we expect from the leader of this nation. And he will go to the polling booths and people will vote for him in the seat of Wentworth on the same basis that I will go to the polling booths and people will vote for me for the Senate. And if we both win our seats, we are both equal to take our positions on the floor of Parliament to represent the constituents of this nation.
Pauline, I noticed that one of your proposals is that there be a royal commission into Islam. And this may seem very relevant in the light of the massacre which occurred in Orlando in the United States. What will this Royal Commission seek to do?
David, you would not believe this. I've just had a jet fly over the top and I've missed most of what you have said. But you were talking about what happened in the United States.
Yes, I was saying that one of your proposals is to have a Royal Commission into Islam. And in the light of what's happened in the United States to Orlando, I'm wondering what you would seek, what you would have the Royal Commission find out.
David, Islam is purporting to be a religion, yet many people who are Muslims themselves say it is a political ideology. Now, what I'm saying is we need to have a Royal Commission or an inquiry into is it truly a religion or is it a political ideology? Under Section 116 of the Australian Constitution, it does, if it is a religion, it does have protection under the Constitution because the government cannot pass any religious or observance on it. We need to determine this because I believe in the mosques, in the schools, what are they teaching them? Do they want to bring in Sharia law? Of course they do. We see this happening all around the world. You've got over 85 Sharia law courts in England. We've seen the problems that they have in Belgium, in Sweden, in France, in Canada, now America, and you have terrorism on the streets. You see murders that are happening. I think that we need to take control of our country and the direction we are headed. They call it the religion of peace. I don't see it that way, and neither do a lot of other Australians. So I want to know exactly where I stand. Hizb ut-Tahrir have come out and said they intend to implement Islam and everything that it stands for into many countries around the world, and I believe they've got into about 50 countries around the world. So I don't want to try and fix up the problems further down the track. Let's do something about it now.
Do you believe that there should be restrictions in relation to immigration? That immigrants should, for example, be required to demonstrate that they will abide by our values?
Oh, most definitely. We have to be very protective of our borders and people that come into Australia. And some of these imams have stated that they have their own beliefs, and yes, a lot of people say there are good Muslims out there and, you know, they're law-abiding, and I have no problem with that. But in times when we have terrorism, we have murders, we have threats of bombings in Australia, I want assurances from these people. I just don't want to hear the words, we've got to be tolerant. I don't want to just hear the words that, you know, they are law-abiding. That may be the case, but the whole thing is, where does their loyalty lie? And I want assurances from them that they don't support the radicalisation that is happening. And I'm not getting that. Australians are not hearing that. And yet a lot of these ones that have created the terrorist attacks around the world have actually been law-abiding, peaceful people, and all of a sudden they're out there murdering people. It's not good enough, and I'm not going to risk that for Australians.
On a completely separate topic, our farmers feel, in many of the instances, they feel as though they're being persecuted. They don't seem to be able to get the water that they need. They feel that they're subject of a mining invasion, and we're seeing land being sold to overseas interests. Will you have a specific policy in relation to agriculture so that we can become the food bowl of the earth that so many politicians are talking about?
Oh, David, isn't it so true that we're losing our farming sector? The average age of a farmer is 54 years of age, and they are saying to the kids, don't stay on the land, there's no future for you. It's a crying shame that's happening. I remember John Anderson, the leader of the National Party, when I was in Parliament in 96 to 98. He was saying we had 125,000 farmers. We can actually survive on 75,000. And here he was from a party that was supposedly to you know, look after the bush, the farming sector. We can be the food bowl of the world if we had the vision and true leadership to actually ensure our farming sector. But no, they open up the floodgates to allow foreign investment to buy up our prime agricultural land, because they can see the increasing populations in their own countries. They will not be able to feed their own people. And an example is this from China of late, buying up huge tracts of land, huge numbers of farms they're buying up, because they want to produce the food to send in their trucks now to their port and back to their own people. We are going to lose the ability to feed ourselves, and they will not be held to account if there is ever a shortage of food in the world, that food stays here.
Do you think
we're losing the profits, we're losing the expertise, and we're losing our land.
Do you think foreign interests should be restricted to long-term or short-term leases rather than getting the freehold to farms?
They should never own the freehold. I don't believe that they should be out here growing the food, for starters. They shouldn't be owning it. We should be actually doing that ourselves and exporting, and the profits stay here in Australia. You spoke about water as well, David.
Yeah, can we come to that a little later, Pauline? At this time, we have to go to a break. This is Conversations with Conservatives, and I'm talking to, I was going to say Senator, I'm talking to Pauline Hanson, who is campaigning to be Senator for Queensland. We'll break now.
Hello everyone, I'm Paul Higgins, and welcome to Safe Worlds TV, the global marketplace, the world leader in internet TV and semantic search, the home of free enterprise, the level playing field that all the world can use for electronic business. With Safe Worlds TV, every business in every country of the world can now be involved in the world economy. There are no barriers to entry. Even the poorest countries and the smallest businesses can be involved. The system is simple. Every country divides into 12 headline channels. Every channel is a gateway to an unlimited number of related community channels. Every community is a social network and a marketplace to sell products and services. There is no limit to the number of businesses that can be connected into a marketplace. There is no limit to the number of products you can sell. All our channels and marketplaces are designed to keep you entertained and to help you do internet business at a cost that everyone can afford. The amazing semantic technology that underpins Safe Worlds TV allows us to deliver this amazing system to the world. It allows us to accommodate millions of TV channels and marketplaces and to link them together into the global marketplace. The vast global marketplace that we are building is the final piece of the electronic global village. This is the ultimate achievement of the internet. What you see here now is only the tip of the iceberg of semantic services that are coming. Come now and see what we've already got. Choose any country of the world, then select the headline channel that you want to explore. Just point and click and follow the logical tree structure. We think you'll be amazed at what we already have in Safe Worlds TV. When you're ready, click on the button at the bottom of the screen and register to become a user. You can start immediately to create your very own internet TV channel. Enjoy the experience. I'm Paul Higgins for Safe Worlds TV.
This is David Flint in Conversations with Conservatives from Safe Worlds TV on the Gold Coast in Queensland, Australia. And I'm speaking with Pauline Hanson, leader of the Pauline Hanson's One Nation Party and candidate for the Senate as a senator for Queensland. Pauline, you have a strong interest in water. In fact, I think you're one of the few people I know who's read Section 100 of the Constitution in relation to water. What is your policy in relation to water in this very arid continent?
Yes, David, my concern is Agenda 21 that we signed in 1992 with 176 other countries around the world. And water is tied up in that in Section 18 of it. And I believe that they want to privatise water in Australia. We can never allow anyone to own water. Water is the lifeblood of a nation and for the people. And we cannot allow anyone to own or control. If you control water, you control where farming goes, industry, manufacturing, population, development, everything. No one owns the water. It's our, it's given to us. You know?
Isn't that the problem with the? Isn't that problem, Pauline? Isn't that the problem with the Murray River Plan?
Exactly right.
And who was the minister there?
Water, you know, because of all the leasing that they've given out or the water rights that they've taken has stopped the flow of the Murray-Darling. It's having a big impact around Broken Hill, further on down to Lake Eyre and Adelaide and the mouth of the river. So they've allowed you know, people to actually take out the water rights. Not only that, it's the privatisation of water, and what they're trying to do under Agenda 21 is stop dams, you know, farmers putting dams on their properties. If they can only capture 10% of the water in the dams, the rest must flow to the rivers and creeks, then they'll have satellite surveillance. So, you know, watching the dams, what the farmers take from the water, it's just total control. And we cannot allow that in a drought-stricken country. How much of our water has been sold to overseas interests, yes, international people who are actually multinationals who own our water in Australia.
Pauline, wasn't that done under Malcolm Turnbull's ministership?
It was. It was done in about 2004.
Yes.
Well, not Malcolm Turnbull, it was done under Howard. John Howard brought that in 2004.
Yes,
and he actually said,
but Malcolm was the minister.
That's exactly right. He was the minister at the time. But see, John Howard actually separated water from land. Should never have done it. So if someone owns the land, doesn't necessarily mean they own the water rights on that land. So it should never have happened. It should be changed back. And we've got to allow the rivers all the way through to flow. You mentioned about Section 100 of the Australian Constitution, which I have actually been raising and speaking about this for years. Now, under that section, it says that the Commonwealth cannot deny the states or the residents of the states the right to the water from the rivers for conservation and irrigational service, for irrigational purposes. Now, what I'm saying there, that has never been challenged in the High Court. The farmers and the people have a right to that water.
There's another aspect of land rights, which is very different in Australia from that in the United States, and that is mining on prime agricultural land. This can be done without, except in Western Australia, this can be done without the consent of the farmers. Do you think that's proper?
It's not proper, and it is under our Constitution to allow, the federal government has mining rights in Australia. So it's quite interesting that we are controlled by this. So we think that we own our land, we don't. If you want miners to come in, they think that there's either gas or mining, whatever type of mining.
Yes, it's usually reserved to the Crown, isn't it?
That's
right. When the Crown grant is given.
I visited a property out at Colomulla. Now they own 52,000 acres. Do you know they've got people just buying up leases for mining rights on their properties? They can't stop it. It's destroyed their livelihood. You should see the mess that their property is in. With these piles of dirt, the mining that's gone on for years, they've got no control over it. They can't do anything. You know, on a daily basis, people are constantly telling me that they have no more rights anymore. They've been stripped away over the years by both the Liberal and the Labor parties.
Another matter that farmers complain to me about is that they are persecuted in relation to vegetation. The local environmental ministry or agricultural ministry seems to want to exercise an almost punitive control over them, even watching them from satellites into the sky as to what they're doing. This doesn't seem to me to be very Australian.
It's not, David. I've flown over the state quite a lot, especially in Queensland. You know, the Vegetation Management Act, and a lot of farmers are actually saying to me now, it is going to destroy their land, their business, if it's allowed, if the Labor government is allowed to wind it right back to what they are planning on doing. Now, I was contacted by another farming family. They said nearly 70% of their land now is they can't clear, they can't do anything with it, it can't grow food. They've been controlled by this Vegetation Act. And this Vegetation Act also comes under Agenda 21. It is a ridiculous agreement that Paul Keating signed us up to, and there's nothing to with this. Is in America, Alabama has actually thrown out Agenda 21. They said no more will they allow this to control their state, and they're actually saying no, we're going back to sovereignty, our own constitution, and they see the impact it's had on their state. We need to start realising that in Australia, because our councils are being driven by the Sustainable Development Agenda 21. Our state governments are imposing these acts on the people, and it's not good for us.
There seems to be a conflict, doesn't there, between the concept of us being the food bowl of the world on the one hand, and this persecution, this constant harrying and interference with farmers' rights, which seems to go against a very old Australian tradition of the farmers being the salt of the earth.
That's right, David. And what I can't understand, I don't know why they're wanting to destroy the farming sector, and that's what appears to be happening here. You know, with the water, with the vegetation, with the farming sector, they don't seem to be doing anything to try and encourage farmers. It's extremely hard for them. A lot of the farmers out there are there because of their passion, the love of the land, and it's handed down through the generations. If we lose the farming sector, this is not something that they can learn out of a textbook. It's a you know, they learn it from generations, hand it down, and it's a trade that we cannot just, you know, snap our fingers and get people there to do it.
This is so true. It is something which is handed down within a family. On this point, we're going to take a break. This is Conversations with Conservatives. I'm David Flint, and I'm in conversation with Pauline Hanson, who is the leader of Pauline Hanson's One Nation Party, which is a national party and which is contesting seats in the Senate across the nation. And Pauline is contesting, was the leading candidate for the party in Queensland. I'm David Flint, and this is Conversations with Conservatives. I'm in conversation with Pauline Hanson, candidate for the Senate in Queensland and leader of Pauline Hanson's One Nation Party. Pauline, one matter which comes across all the time is the question of debt. And we see in the Australian, for example, they publish a spendometer every day. And it contrasts the auction which Mr. Turnbull is offering the voters, and Mr. Shorten is offering the voters. They're both offering to spend a lot of borrowed money. Does this concern you that the debt is increasing?
Oh, greatly, David. It's just out of control. They're out there pork barreling and spending more and more money that we don't have. We're actually borrowing the money. And, you know, we've got to rein it in. We've got to stop it. And it does concern Australians as well. Look, it's like Malcolm Turnbull said, we can't put her into the Senate, you know, she'll destroy the economy. Oh, hang on a minute. I think the economy is already destroyed. It's like when a company goes bust, and you have an administrator come in, you don't blame the administrator because the company's gone bust. And this is what my job will be in the Senate, is to start reining in, making accountability for the open checkbook. It's like you've got the pair of them out there with this going loose with a credit card. Well, someone's got to be the parent here, and if it has to be me, well, then I'll do it.
One of the things the Commonwealth has is a Department of Education, and as is commonly said, they have no schools. Since the Commonwealth has become involved with the schools, the standards seem to have fallen, both in relation to reading ability and mathematical ability, but the Commonwealth is presiding over a program called Safe Schools, which seems to be bringing into the schools gender fluidity and penis tucking and breast binding, all sorts of things which don't seem to be terribly appropriate for school children.
It's not, David, it's not, you are correct, it's not appropriate. It disgusts me that they're actually now playing with the minds of children, and I think it's so wrong, and it's something that I will oppose very, very strongly. We do not want that in our schools. Stop messing around the kids' heads.
We're all
big children, and we do have genders here. We have what is a female, and we have a male gender.
We're all opposed, aren't we, to bullying of anybody in schools, but this doesn't seem to be a program for bullying because its proponent, Ms. Ward, seemed to be saying that it was really a Marxist program to change the family and change society.
Well, it is, and I think it's so wrong. You know, I've been talking to some parents and even teachers, and it's so ridiculous. They're saying, "Oh, the kids can't hold hands now." I remember when I was a kid at school with my girlfriend. You know, my little girlfriend. I'm talking about when I was about 5 or 6, and you're holding your girlfriend's hand. They're just shutting down kids from being children, and I think it's so wrong. You are right. Schools are about learning reading and writing. They can't even get that right because a lot of the kids now in our educational system cannot read or write correctly. There is no competition. There's no striving to reach the top of the class, you know, to be number one. We can't have competition. You can't have competition in sport. Well, I'm sorry, we are not preparing the children for the real life because when they hit the real world, they have to compete. And we can't be saying, "Oh, you poor little darling, you know, don't worry about it, you know, we won't hurt your feelings." Well, I think we need to start teaching these kids in school about you do have to compete. It is good to strive. It is good to be number one. And also, we've got to teach these kids. They all want their rights, but with rights comes with it responsibilities. And what I've seen in our society, and I'm talking to people, there is no respect for parents, there is no respect for the teachers, there is no respect for the police, there's no respect for authority at all. What type of kids are we breeding into our society? Because we are feeling it very much so, what's happening in our society from all this.
Thank you, Pauline. Can I bring you to the other end of life, that is to the elderly? We saw in the budget a surprise provision because the Treasurer had been warning against sudden changes to superannuation because it would destroy confidence. And yet in the budget a provision was inserted to minimise the amount, or maximise rather, the amount that can be received without tax. And this was once you take into account the amount of interest that people can earn, it's quite a small amount of money, significantly smaller than the pensions payable under the old parliamentary superannuation system, which is seeing people come out with $200,000 or so a year. Does that concern you? And if such superannuation legislation comes to the Senate, what will your position be?
Most definitely, David. Actually, it was One Nation in 1999, around 1999-2000, when our Senator Len Harris actually had made some comments about the superannuation of politicians back then. Some changes were made to it. They were forced to make changes to it under John Howard. Now, the superannuation, I believe, should be at the same level as what it is ordinary Australians. And even pay increases, the parliamentarians have given themselves a 10.5% pay increase, yet ordinary Australians around about 2%. This is not the level playing field. And when Joe Hockey said the age of entitlements are over, well, I'm sorry, the leaders of this nation and the politicians, all politicians, have to lead by example. Superannuation should be that no more than all other Australians. And the superannuation where they're starting to, Malcolm Turnbull is now trying to implement changes to it, it's wrong. We're not encouraging people to save for their future, and it should be left alone.
Should it be retrospective? If you make a change, should it be retrospective?
Well, if he changes the superannuation now, it will be retrospective. Yeah, and don't touch the superannuation. People need assurances and guarantees. They've banked on the fact this was brought in, I think, by John Howard, the scheme now, in 2007. Those people have been working towards that. So if you're caught up in the age bracket between 55 and 60, where you are past drawing out that money or just before you can pull it out, it's not right for people, and especially the self-funded retirees. So leave the superannuation alone. People are fed up with the political parties changing it all the time.
It's curious, isn't it, that the self-funded retirees should be the target here when people are encouraged to become self-funded retirees.
when they've been encouraged.
Yes, they're encouraged to become self-funded retirees, and then suddenly the government changes its mind and says, we're going to put an additional tax on this, which undermines confidence completely in the system.
It does, David, and it's happened over the years. Doesn't matter who's been in there, whether it's been the Liberal or the Labor Party. They've always come along to start changing the superannuation. People need guarantees. Where they're headed, they plan for their future. And see,
Yes.
a lot of the parents or the older generation out there are actually, trying to help their kids as well, because the kids are struggling. They're struggling to own their own homes, because a lot of them can't even get jobs. The parents are left with, picking up the pieces from their children because of our society the way it is today. So they have to have guarantees and
Yes.
assurances that their money's going to be safe.
That is so true. Well, on this point, we must go to a break. This is Conversations with Conservatives, and I'm discussing the election with Pauline Hanson, who is the leader of Pauline Hanson's One Nation Party and candidate for the Senate for the state of Queensland. I'm David Flint, and this is Conversations with Conservatives, coming to you from Safewells TV on the Gold Coast in Queensland, Australia. And I'm in discussion with Pauline Hanson. Pauline Hanson is Pauline Hanson's One Nation Senate candidate for Queensland. But Pauline, the campaign this time is broader. On the last occasion you were, I think, standing alone. You're now standing as part of a nationwide party, is that correct?
Yes, I have, David. I went back to the party 1.5 years ago and took up the position as national president of the party. Since then, I've built the party up. We're actually standing 31 candidates in this election. So I'm standing in the Senate for Queensland with four in total for the Senate in Queensland. Plus, I also have Senate candidates in every other state, bar the territories. A lot of support. People are getting behind myself and the party now.
In previous elections, both the Labor Party and the Liberal Party, I think, preferenced you last. That won't be possible now in the Senate, will it?
Behind Greens, yes.
People now can give their own preferences and preference. They can, for example, vote 1 for Labor, 1 for Liberal, and then 2 for you if they wish to.
Well, they can do it that way, but I'm asking for their number 1 vote for the Senate. So when you come to the big white Senate ballot paper in every state, look for Pauline Hanson's One Nation, our logo above the line, and please give us your vote there. But now the political parties do not control the preferences. Preferences belong to the voters. So you choose who you want to vote for first. Then if you want to flow your preferences on, you choose, well, if they don't get in, who's my next best choice, and go down the line like that. And I've got to say, David, also, that a 1 above the line is a formal vote. That has been, the Electoral Commission have actually admitted that, and so has the T-Score.
There's a savings provision, isn't there, in the Act, which authorises that. Now, Pauline, I wanted to ask you a question. One of the problems in this country is youth unemployment, and it's pretty serious problems in parts of the country. What is your policy in that area?
Well, you are right. The further west, especially in outback country towns, rural and regional towns, even you're looking at about 25 to 30% unemployment with youth. what we've got to do is get them into apprenticeship schemes, David. It's no good pushing these kids on to further education, you know, finishing year 12 and on to university, because at the end of the day, a lot of these kids have degrees with no jobs to go to. They're overqualified. But what we are lacking is tradesmen and women. I'd like to see them, if they finish year 10, if they're not academically minded, get into trades. Now, my scheme is that instead of paying kids a New Start allowance or a welfare payment, that if the government was to put that money into paying employers 75% of the first year's wage, 50% of the second year's wage, and 25% of the third year's wage. I know small business people that I've spoken to, can be hairdressers, can be, you know, chefs, can be plumbers and electricians, plasterers, you name it. They said they would actually love this scheme and they would put on apprentices. We'd have our own homegrown tradesmen and women, not bringing in skilled migrants from overseas, filling these positions that belong to our own.
One of the things that I notice is that the leading politicians, the leaders of both parties, must have enormous, as they call it, carbon footprints, because they're travelling around the country constantly. They're going overseas. They're staying in five-star hotels. They would have carbon footprints many times that of the average citizen, although both are very concerned about global warming, which is said to be, they say, created by the carbon dioxide emissions of a man. Does your party have a position in relation to global warming?
Yes, David, it's called common sense. Stop being fed a load of BS by these internationalists and the UN and people with their own hidden agenda. People have to realise that it's been a whole scam that's happening about the carbon dioxide.
There's a lot of carbon being expended there over your head.
Yes, it was. That's exactly right. A lot of carbon. I've actually seconded on my
called carbon dioxide.
Queensland is Malcolm Roberts. Now, Malcolm Roberts is very experienced and an expert, you know, to deal with climate change and what's been told. Now, he has constantly asked the politicians, the scientists, everyone, what is the empirical evidence that you have that says humans create carbon dioxide? There's none. They've never received it. Even the UN or the IPCC has no empirical evidence. We are being fed, like I said, a load of BS. I want to see Malcolm on the floor of Parliament to actually debate this whole issue, inform Australians what is happening. If we are going to go into an emissions trading scheme, or it is a carbon tax, it will destroy industries, manufacturing, the cost of living. People will not be able to afford it. We've got to handle this in a very measured way. Yes, it is great to see solar energy and wind power, but when we have wind powers is costing $100,000 to erect it, yet the government is paying them $500,000, it's costing us more.
Are you concerned about?
We don't have the way of storing the energy from solar.
I'm sorry, I was interrupting you, but are you concerned about the health impact of wind farms?
Definitely. I'm hearing too much about it that I think we need to investigate it further. A lot of people are starting to complain about the wind power driven, so we need to look at that. But even solar energy, that we don't have the ability to store it. People don't understand about we need the coal-fired power stations to actually give us the base load for our energy needs, that especially at prime time, 6 o'clock at night or 6 o'clock in the morning, when everyone's wanting that instant energy. So until we get the research right and we can store the energy from solar power and other renewable energies, we've got to make sure that we don't have an impact in Australia that's going to destroy industries, manufacturing, small business, because of the rising cost of electricity and other costs involved with this.
How do you feel you're going in the campaign, Pauline? You're going around the the state, seeing people? What's the reaction?
David, there's been an absolutely wonderful response. People are fed up with the major political parties. In the past, it's like, well, you know, we better just be careful who we put in. And it's not happening this time around. People have really had enough of the major political parties. They're sick of the old rhetoric. They're sick of, you know, every election, it's all about the debt, it's all about the health, and it's all about schools. And yet nothing changes. They see the decline in their standard of living, job security, no future for their kids. They're frightened about the terrorism that's impacting in Australia. They're really concerned about the foreign ownership of our farmland. There's these issues that people are saying, no more, we've had enough. I'm getting so much support, it's absolutely amazing. And I do believe that we're going to pull a couple of senators in Queensland and other states.
Do you see yourself?
That's how big the swing is. It's very, very strong. I think people looking at me as a person, I've been around for 20 years now. I've gained experience, knowledge, understanding. And I'm a person that doesn't backflip like Turnbull and Shorten. Actually, I was thinking about giving them both a tube of Voltaren because they've been doing that many backflips.
Well,
the fact is, we want stability. We want people who have vision and true leadership for our nation, because people are screaming out for it.
Well, I think on that point you've stated your case very well, and I'm sure the people of Australia will listen to what you have to say. So on that point, I'd like to thank you. This is David Flint in Conversations with Conservatives, and today we've listened to the leader of Pauline Hanson's One Nation Party, a national party, and the leading candidate of that party for the Senate in Queensland, Pauline Hanson. Thank you, Pauline.
Thank you, Dave.